So the first story that, it seems like a minor thing, but it caught my attention, was the fact that the DPP, he was, in the hot seat again, so to speak, although he's not necessarily the one that's whose seat is really cooking. But he did remark that while he made the comments that he made about his staffing levels, and I believe he reiterated it to the GSC again this week, he did say that, look, I am not looking to cause a bacchanal. I'm paraphrasing here, right? These are not his words. But essentially, he said, I could have, and maybe there was a part of him that wanted to, but he said more or less, I was looking at the bigger picture. I was looking at the longer term. It doesn't make sense for me to engage in that kind of thing. When he was, for all intents and purposes, seemed as though after he made his initial remarks, the responses were somewhat defensive and to some degree attacking because, they needed to blame somebody. So some of it was implied in his direction. The Prime Minister said, well, look, you didn't move in the building, this, that. The AG and the Chief Justice also weighed in. And the DPP didn't necessarily respond in the same manner. Now, here's the interesting thing. I appreciate that the DPP said that, like, look, there's no value in responding to bubble with bubble.
You like that word a lot, don't you?
Yeah. It sums up, what it is without me having to go to use stronger, harsher language. But the thing is, I appreciate that on principle. I think that's how it should be more or less almost all of the time. I'm not entirely sure if it was in his interests for him to take the high road to this degree this time.
Depends on how you interpret it, because you're absolutely right to say on principle, I will not engage in any public dispute or spat with any government, and more so this particular government. The interpretations of which I speak of is the Director of Public Prosecutions, Roger Gaspard, saw it fit to once more publicly express the need, right, the need to hire more staff in order to fully equip the office of the DPP to its full strength, and to ensure that there is efficiency and that that particular institution is effective in carrying out its duties. The issue is not him saying that. The issue that the government had was him saying that the criminal justice system, because of the staffing of the office of the DPP, was on the brink of collapse. You heard from the Prime Minister on a political platform after that, ranting as per usual. You heard from the Attorney General following that, and then you heard, surprisingly, and at the same time not surprisingly, from Chief Justice Ivor Archie, who more or less seems to be a party card holder in a position that is supposed to be autonomous or separate to the government. So from the time he made that statement about the criminal justice system was on the brink of collapse, that is when the government took issue. And that is when the government saw it as him being confrontational. I actually applaud him. And I said before, I applaud him for raising these issues publicly once more. I applaud him for making the statements that he did, because it's not to say that he held back. Probably there was more details and information that he could have shared, but in his choice of words, he was very much making a strong statement without using strong language. So that is where the issue lay. For me, him not responding, and this is why I say the interpretations are very important, is it that even though his position and his role is constitutionally protected, is it that he faced the wrath of certain high-ranking officials behind closed doors? You remember, certain things could be said. You never know what discussions happened behind the closed doors, but there is a possibility that some heavy hands were laid on the table, and he didn't. He decided, listen, let me refrain from going any further. That's one part. The second part is, on principle, as you suggested, he's probably taken the high road.
Well, that's what he said. That's based on what he said. Yes.
I can only hope that even though he's taken the high road, it does not lead to a prolonged silence. We need to keep raising these issues publicly. The public needs to be aware. The public needs to know. even if the public knows, it doesn't mean something will be done about it. But if the criminal justice system were to collapse, at least the public can say to themselves, well, we were not totally clueless. We were not totally clueless, and we understand where the faults lay. So I hope that he continues to speak about his issues and the desires and what is necessary, because conversation is easy. It's the actual change that is the more difficult thing to happen.
The thing is, one could argue if you don't speak out in cases like these, then you are part of the problem. You are acting not necessarily as bad or unethically as those who are intentionally doing whatever it is that's not correct, but you are aiding and abetting. You're giving your silent consent by default, which is not good. You're turning, looking the other way. Now, which so far he hasn't done, because again, he has reiterated the need for the staffing issue to be solved. I think one of the differences between him and, if I am not misremembering what the Chief Justice said, what the DPP said was, we have a problem. And he left it to people to figure out the cause and whoever they wanted. He didn't say who to blame. He just said, there is a problem. And the problem is then causing this bigger, larger problem. Now, I suspect that obviously certain people who technically are just based on how things are drawn up with who has what responsibility, like the Chief Justice, like the government, they're going to see it as an attack on them. The unfortunate thing is, if the DPP doesn't have to name you, if the DPP doesn't even have to throw anything in your direction, if just the laws of the land are going to point at you, maybe you should think about what that means and how you respond first. Now, the Prime Minister, he was defensive. Technically, what he said was not completely irrelevant to the situation, but he was defensive, and of course, it kind of bounced things back, and he did point to some extent towards the DPP. Which,
I still think it was irrelevant.
Well, okay, fair enough.
No, but that's my opinion.
Enough, yeah. The Chief Justice, so the Prime Minister, to some extent, he pointed once at the DPP. Chief Justice, I think, went a bit further. I can't remember what the Attorney General said, but at this point...
The Attorney General stated that not everybody can get what they want.
Okay, so he was just being silly, and in my opinion, because we're not talking about, somebody wants a grant to get a donkey cart.
I think also, Sean...
But you understand my point? The things coming his way were pointed at him. He didn't point blame at anybody, which is perhaps why it seemed as though it was coming at all corners, because everybody had a Freudian slip and a guilty conscience.
This is precisely the point. When you had the Prime Minister, the Office of the Attorney General, the Attorney General and the Chief Justice, all responding from different corners, from different angles, being defensive. It's not dealing with the issue.
That is also true.
When you become defensive like that, it means that there is this sense, I wouldn't say of guilt, but you understand that the responsibilities that lay with you are not actually, you're not carrying out those responsibilities and duties. And therefore, you have to be defensive because it's part of public relations as well, which is why the Prime Minister chose to focus more on the building.
Right.
And that has been there, and rent has been paid. He said he was only just made aware of it before making that speech, which is absolute nonsense and ridiculousness.
You're the Prime Minister. You involve yourself when you feel like it.
But,
how is it?
But that's the thing. You involve yourself when you feel like it. And that's why he became defensive.
All right, we have to move on, but one thing to point out. I still have a question, though. That's a reason, what you just said is a reason why I don't know if the DPP should take so much of a high road. Maybe he should be a little bit more combative. But I'll say this, I have a question. What channels were used before he went public? Because technically you should try to sort it out privately. Or outside of the eye of the public before you go and make public statements.
I wouldn't say combative. I would simply say stand your ground and stand for what's right. Not necessarily combative. But anyway.